Up with Shay. Thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are. I am forever grateful for you following this YouTube journey and listening to my crazy ramblings or what have you. Welcome back. I am so excited. Today's topic that I want to talk about is finding forgiveness and how finding forgiveness will really set your soul free and yourself free. And I say that because I have had to practice a lot of forgiveness, and in a situation in my life that happened a little while ago that I honestly didn't think I could do, I guess would be the best way to say it. I feel like if you have ever been in a situation where a person really hurt you or upset you, you realize, like, I don't like this person, all these angry thoughts. You're like, I'm never gonna freaking forgive this person for doing what they did, and they're awful, and they're this, and they're that, and yada, 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 because they hurt you. And maybe it's not that they hurt you, they upset you. I don't know. They did something that disappointed you, and to find forgiveness in that is sometimes really difficult because you're going through so many different emotions. But once you snap out of it, and maybe not even necessarily snap out of it, but at some point you reach a point where you're a little more clear-headed. You're still emotional, but you're less emotionally triggered, I guess would be the best way to put it. And through that, you learn to find forgiveness in your heart, even when you don't think that you can, because sometimes you're looking for an apology that you'll never get so that maybe you can forgive them. At least that's my own experience with this entire thing. And there's been a few people in my life now that I realize when I forgave them, like genuinely forgave them, and not even to their face necessarily, but in my own heart, I was able to move through that situation and the things that happened with them differently. And it really set me free. That would be the best way to describe it. It felt like a weight was lifted off of me, and I was no longer carrying this emotional baggage, I guess you could say. And it was something that I'm like, yep, it happened, I processed, and I'll let it go. To get there, it really sometimes takes people years, and I mean years, to really genuinely forgive someone for whatever it is that happened between them. And my goal with this video is to help you move through the process in a different way so that you can find forgiveness for yourself, not even for the other person, because at the end of the day, it's really for yourself. And when you're holding on to something, it does not serve you. It does not serve you at all. And to hold on to that, you don't make space for something beautiful to come into your life. And I know that every single one of you out there want more for yourselves. Maybe you don't see it yet because you're clouded and you're upset and you're angry or whatever it is, and you're like, no, I'm not gonna forgive it. You're crazy. What are you talking about? Trust me when I say you're gonna be so much better off. You're gonna be able to let that go. You're gonna feel like you can breathe again. If you take anything from this, it's to let it be. So I'm going to share two different situations with you. One was with my mom and learning to forgive her for the things that happened during my parents' divorce. And the second was a person that I was in a relationship with that genuinely just shattered my heart into a million pieces by behaving in a way that really just, it hurt very badly. And it was not something that I thought a person who loved me would do. And that was twice in my life now that two people who were a huge part of my world just absolutely broke my heart. To get where I am with my mom in this day is not a miracle, but I honestly didn't know if we'd ever get here, and it wasn't something that I ever counted on. I know that I've shared bits and pieces, but back when I started college and I left home for the first time, a part of me was just like, I'm really happy that I don't have to be around my family or my mom, because we barely had a good relationship at that time. And when I started college, it felt like a fresh start, and I got to be away from everything that had happened during my parents' divorce. And it was finally my vision and that I was free, and that freedom was finally coming for me, and I didn't have to deal with my mom anymore. That was, honest to God, my perspective on it. And I sit here today to tell you that me and my mom are healing and working on our relationship together, and we've been doing that for a few years now. And I feel like in the last year and a half, when I started doing this work that I've been doing on myself to just better myself as a person, and like I said, show up differently in my relationships, me and my mom have really been able to patch up a lot of things. But first, it came with finding forgiveness in myself, so that I was able to forgive her and realize that, like, shit happens, and my mom's also a human. And once I let go of everything that really happened between us, I was able to talk to her about it without it being emotionally crippling and without it being emotionally triggering. And first and foremost, that is probably the most important part, is to get to that point where you're emotionally stable with the situation. And then once you get there, that's genuinely, forgiveness kind of just comes naturally, because you realize that that's just life. And man, life truly does just go on. As simple and annoying as that might sound as a statement, it is 100% true that life goes on, and how you choose to live through it is going to make a world of a difference, which is why I started this channel, to help people tune in a different way and share my own story in hopes that you can turn your own lives around. So I am going to share a little bit more about the stuff with my mom, and then I'll talk about the one with the relationship, because both of them have to deal with people who are important in my life, and how I'm kind of working through it, and how I did work through it with my mom. So with my mom, with my parents' divorce, I was so angry with her. I absolutely despised her. She would say some mean things during the divorce because she was in a lot of pain, and it was things that honestly made me feel like I wasn't loved, like she didn't care about me, like I wasn't gonna be successful in life because of X, Y, and Z. And a lot of it was her own projection, because she wanted so much more for me, but the way she did it was by being extra tough on me and giving me quote-unquote tough love, because she believed if the person that gave birth to you basically was able to be so cruel to you, that you'd be strong enough out there in the world because the world was cruel. And oh man, like, my self-worth growing up was very, very low, and I didn't believe that I had a lot in me and that I could be successful, or even that I was remotely intelligent in certain ways, because my mom didn't make me feel that way. And like I said, a lot of that was her own projection, but I want you to understand kind of where I was. And to be honest, like, sharing this story is really scary, because these were parts of myself that I wasn't able to acknowledge or have a conversation with anyone about, because I was afraid that they would judge my mother and think of her as this god-awful person because I felt so shitty. And if you know me but you don't know my mom and you don't necessarily know my past, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like, what did you go through? At the time, it was extremely traumatic, and now, like, looking back at it, like, not that it necessarily should have happened, but shit happens, and we are all humans here. And I know I've said this in a video before, but when you realize that your parents are also just humans working through their own things, the load becomes a little bit lighter. Just realize that you are this person with a soul and feelings and emotions, and your parents are people with this soul and emotions, and they too went through stuff in their lives that made them the way they are. Just like you can sit here today and be like, I went through this stuff and it kind of makes me the way I am. But you have to learn to really hone in on that, acknowledge it, work through it, whether that's through therapy. I personally, I'm a big advocate for therapy, but just talking about it and sharing it and being vulnerable with it and feeling the emotions and facing the emotions and then talking through it however you want to talk through it. And with my mom, that was something that happened, and we didn't communicate at all. And my mom started to do her own work and talk to a therapist and work through things herself, and that's when she showed up differently as my mom and as a parent and as a person in this world. And then she would reach out and apologize and, you know, tell me how sorry she was for the things that she did. And for a while I was just like, well, yeah, you were awful and I didn't like you, and I was holding on to that. So there was still moments where I was like, I still don't like you, and I kind of just like don't forgive you for it, and you should be sorry. And that was kind of my perspective for a little while. And then I started to feel guilty, like my mom's, you know, reaching out to me, and she's my mom, she's my blood, she's my family, she's everything. She's the person who brought me on this planet, and I'm being absolutely awful to her. Finally, like you guys know, I was talking to a therapist, and I finally felt comfortable and acknowledged that's what I was doing, and I started talking to her about it and opening up, and it was just tears, so many tears, like, and pain and anger and sadness. And then I realized, like, all I really ever wanted was for my mom to say I'm sorry, and all I ever really wanted was to have a healthy relationship with my mom and be able to have someone that I could talk to. I mean, she's the person that I look up to the most, and she's someone that I love and adore and respect and am so proud of for everything that she's done. And to get there and to realize, you know, my mom also went through a really hard time, and just have an open, honest, raw, vulnerable conversation with my mom was not something that we've ever done before, ever. And when I did that, I found the forgiveness in my heart, and I realized that's all I could have ever wanted. I loved her regardless of the situation, and she loved me regardless of the situation, and all I wanted was to connect with her. And when I allowed myself to forgive what happened and realize that there was no right or wrong in the situation, it's just what it was at the time. You do with what you can in moments, and how you choose to handle it further down the line or whatever it is, you can always work through it. And love genuinely does solve a lot of things. And I don't mean it in a way like, oh, if you give a person love, it's gonna solve it. But if you can find the love and the forgiveness in your heart for yourself for what had happened, and realize that we're all just people here, and we're all going through emotions here, and we're all experiencing life in one way or another, and give the situation love, nurture the emotions that you felt. Allow yourself to be angry, allow yourself to be sad, but realize those were only temporary emotions. It is no longer who you are in that moment. It's just something that you experienced. I do believe that everyone can see and reflect that way, because when you realize that those emotions that you felt in the situation are not necessarily how you feel now. And when you can remove the two and process through that, that's really where the magic starts to happen. You realize you are more than the situation you were, and you have more to offer than the situation you were put in. And where you are today is a lot more important than where you were in the past, and you have zero reason to hold on to it. It's like you're throwing a bag of rocks off of you, and you feel light and you feel free, and you can just talk freely and be with your emotions and realize that it's a part of you, it's not who you are. And I think that's the biggest part with forgiveness, is that you're kind of forgiving yourself. Like, yes, you're forgiving the person in your own, in some way, but when you can forgive yourself for what had happened, I hope that makes sense, what I mean by that, because a part of this forgiveness really is learning to forgive yourself for even being in that situation in the first place, I think is what I'm trying to say here. And with my mom, I I don't know, I felt that I could have maybe handled things differently or been differently and all these other things. And now we have a really great relationship and we're constantly working on things together, but we're learning and we're doing it together. And it's when I finally allowed myself to stop being angry, take a step back, and then realize, like, you need to stop being angry, Shay, and you need to start forgiving yourself for being a brat about it, and realize that if you can just forgive and let go and give your own self some love, that that's not who you are, and realize that, like, that's not who your mom wants to be either, then you can move forward. And we did. And I am so happy that we did, because my mom's a very important person in my life. I mean, she's my mom. To get where we are, it's been a long time, but it's never too late, and that's another thing. And if you can find that softness in yourself when you feel all the emotions heavily, things will change. I believe it because it changed for me, so I know that it can change for others, and that is what I wish and hope for all of you. As for the other situation, it was a person I was in a relationship with who absolutely shattered my heart, and I blamed myself for everything that happened. I started with these negative thought patterns like, well, if I had just done this, then maybe this wouldn't have happened, or if I had given more of this, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. I just felt like I wasn't enough for that person, and that was really difficult, because by not feeling like I was enough, I tried to make myself enough in so many ways, and it did nothing for me. It just made me feel like more shit. And at the end of the day, you really cannot blame yourself for the behavior of others, and that's where I needed to learn to forgive myself. And when I learned to forgive myself and realize that it wasn't me, I was able to realize the situation that that other person was maybe in, and forgive everything that happened and let it go, and realize the only thing that matters now was me, and realize that I was enough. I had to work through a lot of demons to feel that way, and there are still moments where I struggle and things happen where I'm clearly still healing and learning not to be triggered by it. If you're ever in that situation where someone broke your heart, realize that at the end of the day, it is not you at all, and you need to learn to also give yourself love and forgive yourself for trying to make yourself something that you are not, and realize, like, it's gonna be okay. And by learning to forgive yourself in the weirdest of ways, you learn to forgive the other person, because you're hard on yourself, but then you're able to kind of reflect and put yourself in their shoes, that maybe, you know, whatever they're going through, they clearly have to work on too, but that's not your baggage to carry anymore, and you can let it go and work on you. By doing that and really living your truth and living your life, and sending love, and instead of holding on to anger and pain and holding a grudge, that you can heal and you move on. And at some point, I believe everyone finds the closure that they need to in whatever situation it is, and you let it go, and you live in this harmony and this peace that you're not carrying on to something, because you learn to forgive the situation for what it was. And more importantly, you stop blaming yourself or being hard on yourself for whatever it is. That's what I believe in all of this. And by learning to forgive, you set your soul free, and you set yourself free, and you get to live life without that emotional baggage, because you've worked through it and you've had the courage to just face it and realize, like, it is what it is. Life is what it is. And when you can just be okay with that and sit with that, but also let yourself feel and go through everything, you just feel very free. And then you can just move forward and work on yourself and be with yourself and love yourself that is what is most important at the end of the day. I believe that when you're able to do that, it really does kind of change your relationships, because you're able to have these conversations in a more centered, grounded place, and you're no longer going to be triggered by those situations, I guess would be another very important facet. I think it's all important, but that is my story, and that's what I want to share with you in 2 very dark times on my thought processes. Rather, I learned to find forgiveness in my heart, even though I was beside myself with anger and sadness and pain, and we all want revenge when we're hurt, right? That's just kind of human nature. We can't help it, but you can work through it, and when you work through it and realize the bigger picture of things, it really makes a difference. That's what I wanted to share today. I hope you take something away from it. I know that I like to give homework, so honestly, with this one, it's a lot of layers. So if you could even think of someone or something that you haven't quite forgiven and you're holding on to that grudge, pick that situation and start to work through it. If you can even sit there with yourself and be like, this is what I want to let go of, this is where I want to heal and forgive. And forgiveness is in a lot of different ways. It could be for me, it was forgiving myself for being in those situations and how I behaved in those situations and how I behaved after those situations. So like with my mom, how I behaved in it, where I was holding on to the grudge and kind of being an asshole when she was trying to reach out. And then with the situation with the person I was in a relationship with, it was learning to forgive myself for staying in the situation for longer than I kind of should have, I guess is the best way that I could describe it. But forgiveness looks different in so many ways, but at the end of the day, it's really not holding on to a grudge and letting the situation go, letting yourself feel and process, really going through the stages of whatever it is, and genuinely just acknowledging this is what happened and letting it go. Life goes on. So that would be my homework, is just pick one thing, one situation, one person, whatever it is that's holding you back. You gotta let it go, because until you let it go, you're not gonna make space for something else to come in. And no one should live with that baggage. It's crippling, trust me. Been there. Try it out. Let me know what happens. I'm here to have that conversation. If you need a person to listen, honest, I'm here. So don't be afraid to reach out. If you enjoyed this video, like. If you want to see more of my content, please hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you join the Growing Up with Shay crew. Share your thoughts with me below, or if there's anything you want to send me, DM me on Instagram. I am here. Remember, I'm here. I am here for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Sending you lots of love, light, and forgiveness in this world.